Slavery is back.
Welcome to a place where private business profit from a captive labour force, yet pennies are spent on medical services to a population in which the Indigenous, the poor and the mentally ill are overrepresented. Where isolation, humiliation and degradation are facts of life. Welcome to prison.
It depends who's telling the story, I suppose. The prisoners would have one view, the people who work in the prison system would have another, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin' Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin' Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. And a warning that this episode of Doin' Time contains audio descriptions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have died, and discussion of deaths in custody, strip searches, and also about women in prison. This is Marisa and I'll be with you for the next hour. Today's broadcast is dedicated to all women in prison and also women who have been formerly incarcerated, and with an added focus on ending strip searches in Australia, so-called Australia. On today's show, we will first bring you a conversation with Sohini, Mehta and Monique Hurley from the Human Rights Law Centre. Monique is an Associate Legal Director in the First Nations Justice Team at the Human Rights Law Centre, along with Sohini, who is a Senior Lawyer in the same team. Sohini and Monique are co-authors of Ending Strip Searching in Australian Prisons, a joint report by the Human Rights Law Centre, Flat Out and the formerly incarcerated Girls Justice Advocate Melbourne FIGJAM collective that was published in March this year. After that, you will hear from Tabitha Lean, First Nations prison advocate, who will yarn about Crim Con 2026, which is a gathering built by and for criminalised and formerly incarcerated people, grounded in the belief that the people most impacted by prisons, policing and punishment are not just participants in these conversations, but leaders, theorists, artists and organisers in their own right. More about this event shortly. A couple of weeks ago, the Doin' Time show had a big yarn with FIGJAM collective members, Nina, Georgia and Kelly, about their lived experience of prison and strip searches. We discussed also the report. I have invited Sohini and Monique from the Human Rights Law Centre onto the show to follow up on discussing the report in more detail from the perspective of the Human Rights Law Centre, essentially covering the recommendations, key findings and alternatives to the very brutal strip search regime, which is a gross violation of human rights. I thoroughly enjoyed interviewing and talking with FIGJAM members. They were an absolute delight to interview, and lived experience is key. But I also know for a fact that Monique and Sohini are wonderful lawyers, and the Human Rights Law Centre is an excellent resource, and I've interviewed them many times about other issues. And I wanted to have them on to talk about the report in more detail. Hello, Sohini and Monique, welcome.
Thanks so much,
Hi,
Marisa.
Marisa.
Hi. I wanted to just give a very timely introduction to the two of you, and also look at the great work that the Human Rights Law Centre has done to date.
Yeah, definitely. Always a real privilege and a pleasure to speak with you and come on Doing Time.
Absolutely. Now, Monique, I was wondering, Monique and Sohini, if, Monique, you could start off maybe talking about a little bit about the report and the key findings, and then Sohini, you could talk about some of the recommendations, but please feel free to have it take shape as a conversation. It doesn't matter if you interrupt each other. It's all about just having a chat about it.
Sure, of course. I might just start with a little bit of background to the report and the project, if that's okay with you, Marisa.
Sure.
This, as you said in the introduction, the Ending Strip Searching in Australian Prisons report was launched earlier this year. It's been a really epic piece of work spanning many, many years at this point and many, many freedom of information requests. The report has really been a labour of love between the Human Rights Law Centre, Flat Out, and the formerly incarcerated women, trans and gender diverse folks who make up the FIGJAM collective and who you've spoken with before. We will not be nearly as interesting and insightful as them, but that's good that they've gone before us and we can just follow up with some of the things that we wanted to draw out of the report. But the report itself builds on, decades and decades of work that's been done by lived experience advocates who have been calling out strip searching for what it is, sexual abuse at the hands of the state. And the report also follows, 38 years of Flat Out supporting women in prison, and also a previous collaboration that Flat Out and the Human Rights Law Centre did on a report called Total Control from back in 2017, which really focused on Victoria and the use of routine strip searches on women in prison and the harms caused by that practice. So since 2017 and that report with the focus on Victoria, we've been doing freedom of information requests across the country in every state and territory to compile data on the really excessive rates that women, men and children in prisons are being subjected to strip searching. And this report that came out earlier this year sets out all of that data alongside the harrowing contributions from the lived experience folks that confirm that strip searching is a deeply, deeply harmful and unnecessary practice that needs to be abolished. And one of the main calls of the report is to ban strip searches in law. And that might be a good segue for Sohini to talk about some of the key findings or recommendations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Over to you, Sohini.
Yeah, sure. So the key recommendation, as Monique said, is to ban strip searching in law, and it really should be, people should bear in mind that strip searching is a practice that's already authorised by law, even though it's so degrading and even though there's so much evidence of how ineffective it is. So what the report is doing is calling on all state and territory governments to remove those powers to strip search people from the law, and to also prohibit the practice in law to safeguard against further abuse of people in prison. The report also has some recommendations around regulating the use of alternatives, but that might require some explanation of what the alternatives are. I don't know, Marisa, if it would be helpful to go into that now.
Absolutely.
So we know that strip searchers hardly ever pick up contraband, and there's obviously no reason to subject people to a practice that can scar them for life when there are less invasive alternatives available. Some of the alternatives available that the report discusses are the scanners that are, similar to those ones that are used at airports and public buildings around the country. There are some scanners that have been introduced into prisons in the country, and there is some evidence that where they've been introduced, they have reduced unnecessary strip searches. So there was one, for example, encouraging report from South Australia that after scanners were introduced into a youth prison there were a couple of 7-month periods where reportedly no strip searches took place at the youth prison. And that's compared to hundreds of strip searches that were reported in a previous period before the technology was installed. But it's also important to bear in mind that strip search, that scanners haven't always eliminated strip searches, and that, while there are still these powers to strip search people in prison, people are now being, subjected to potentially really invasive searches, strip searches and body scan searches. Some of the alternatives to strip searching could be nothing at all, which might sound radical, but it's really important to consider that people in prison are already in secure custody. They're already under constant surveillance, and sometimes there is just no need to search them. There's all this data that shows that strip searching is conducted really routinely. That means, routinely around visits, around transfers from court, on the way to and from medical appointments. The data even showed that there were cases where people in prison were strip searched after non-contact visits via an iPad. And it really raises the question of, why is there any need to search a person, when they're in secure custody like that?
It really is deplorable, and I believe that this report's being published at a time when the country is experiencing a mass imprisonment crisis and tough on crime.
Yes, exactly. And I think Monique could also speak to, where government's priorities are lying in terms of supporting communities versus supporting prisons.
Yeah, obviously all of this work is couched within the context of the government in Victoria and really across the country needing to support people in communities, not prisons. Rather than opening new and expanding current prisons, governments should really be proactively addressing the country's mass imprisonment crisis and building up the community supports that are required to divert people away from prisons in the first place. That's another key recommendation made by the report, alongside some other recommendations around improving access to justice for people in prison, like establishing independent legal services that only currently exist in Queensland and in New South Wales, for everybody across the country in prison to be able to get access to legal information and representation to enforce their rights. And another recommendation made by the report was also something that I know that you are always interested in, Marisa, is and that we've spoken about before, is the lack of implementation of the United Nations Anti-Torture Protocol, the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture, which is also commonly referred to as OPCAT, which can play a really important role if that's implemented properly in terms of shining a spotlight on cruel and degrading prison practices like strip searches, and can help make the case for those kinds of practices to be abolished. And really the failure of governments, and the Victorian government in particular, to not have acted on that yet really represents an ongoing and callous disregard for the human rights and the lives of people that are behind bars in Victoria.
Absolutely, and yes, we have talked about that a lot. And sometimes there's not really that much of a shine of spotlight, really, because nothing's done. Yeah, absolutely. It's really distressing, and also really, it's really hard to put into words how, frustrating it is, particularly the recent Victorian state budget was delivered earlier this month, and an eye-watering $229 million was allocated to increasing the capacity of the Victorian prison system. And that's, a really staggeringly high amount of money that could be better spent on building up the community supports that the evidence is really clear helps prevent people be criminalised in the first place. And that's an amount that's significantly more than has been allocated to programs keeping people out of prison. And one example of that is there was only $43 million allocated to delivering programs in prisons aimed at reducing the chance that people will be recriminalised again in the future. And so I think, really, instead of pouring money into prisons, the Allen government should be supporting the community-led alternatives that we know help keep people out of prison and put at risk of being subjected to barbaric practices like strip searching in the first place. Thank you for linking that to the budget, because I was going to ask ask you too about that, and that's really important. I mean, there's so much money being put into not only prisons but also over policing as well.
Yeah, I was actually looking at the figures for the police today as well, and it's just really, it just says a lot about the government's priorities, that they're prepared to pump so much money into prisons and policing. 137.7 million allocated to more resourcing for police. And just in light of all of the evidence in the news this week about inappropriate use of tasers by police, all of the work done by the Centre Against Racial Profiling, confirming what communities have been saying for decades at this point about how particular communities are targeted and over-policed and experiencing racist interactions with the police. It's really, it's a really sad state of affairs in Victoria.
Indeed. Thank you so much for highlighting that point. I mean, people in prison experience strip searches as acts of sexual assault and coercive control. And one of the things that I found pretty empowering, not just as a radio broadcaster but as a prison activist, is talking with the three women that I interviewed from FIGJAM. And, if people in prison, if the officers in prison and the government looked at safety protocols, there wouldn't have to be strip searches. You go to the scanners. You use the scanners to do that.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, it's definitely not something that people in the wider community would ever accept, and we should apply the same rule to people in prison, especially since we know about the high numbers of people in prison who've been through a huge amount of trauma and who are victim survivors of family violence, sexual violence and coercive control. That said, because we know about this culture of control and coercion in prisons, we should also be wary of, using body scanning as a direct replacement for strip searches or alongside strip searches. So the call is really for strip searches to be banned in law, but also for the body scanning alternatives to be tightly regulated. So that really means that body scanning should only ever be used where it's absolutely necessary, after any less intrusive methods have been exhausted and there's a strong, reasonable basis to believe that someone's carrying some specific dangerous contraband.
That's right. And what became apparent when the interview happened with Kelly, Georgia and Nina is the absolute generosity with which they spoke about their testimonies. And admittedly, when they came in, we actually had a chat off air first, and I talked about safety and talked about that they didn't have to disclose anything that they didn't want to talk about. And we had a really good little session before we started, because I felt like the power of testimony, you have to be able to feel emotionally well enough to discuss that on air. So I prepared them for it. And it was just, I felt like it was so generous of them to talk about sexual abuse, to talk about what happened in detail. And some of these testimonies are really powerful. And I think it's an absolute shame that, the government is doing nothing about it.
Yeah, it is. And all power to Kelly, Georgia, Nina and the FIGJAM crew.
All of them.
It's been an absolute privilege to work alongside them on this piece of work. And I think, you're right. But there is things that people can do, and we've got to mobilise and work together to push back against these, diabolically bad systems. And FIGJAM probably also flagged this in their interview, but they have set up a website and are starting a campaign to end strip searching in prisons. And so anyone interested in reading and sharing the report, signing their change.org petition or finding out other ways that you can get involved in terms of endorsing or supporting that campaign, the FIGJAM website for that is www.endstripsearching.com. So encourage everybody to support the really incredible and powerful work that FIGJAM is doing in that space.
Moving forward, that's a really fantastic thing that can be done. Also, just on another note, I was just having a look at the report here. Rarely any items found were dangerous, were they? Those items that I can see here were stationery, personal care products, jewellery, food and basic clothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really draws attention to how disproportionate the method is to find those really innocent items. And there were also some cases where hundreds of strip searches were conducted and actually no items were found. So, for example, in April 2022 in Victoria, there were 221 strip searches recorded at the Dame Phyllis Frost Centre and 0 items were found.
And I believe in South Australia, following the installation of scanners at Kulana Tapa Youth Prison, the practice of strip searching children has ceased.
Yeah, so that's based on the response to Freedom of Information requests in South Australia, and that covered 2 7-month periods. And yeah, we're hoping those can be confirmed and that the practice has ceased. I guess why we're calling for the practice to be banned in law is because, while an operational ban or a ban in practice would be a really important step forward, a stronger safeguard, to prevent against little quiet and quick changes to policy in the future would be for strip searching to be prohibited by law and not just in policy or in practice.
Exactly. And
I would just add to that too, that all of this work that has been done on building the data evidence base for this report is also based on information that prison authorities have provided, and there's a real issue with transparency and the recording of strip searches in the first place. So we think it's probably really fair to say that all of the data in the report is likely an underestimate of the extent of the use of the practice. In some jurisdictions, there aren't records being kept at all. In some jurisdictions, they couldn't be disclosed because there was no centralised register. In most other jurisdictions, the records were really hard to interpret because they were incomplete, unclear. In some places, it's a handwritten ledger, and you have to try and understand the different handwriting that's written. Really, really hard to get the data, and really relying on prisons to be collecting that data in the first place. And so even though some prisons have reported low or no strip searching, it is also, to be treated with a degree of scepticism in terms of them being accountable in circumstances where transparency is really lacking.
Absolutely.
I would also add that I think one of the real strengths of the partnership and working with the FIGJAM collective was that they really helped us interpret the data from that lens. And actually one of the FIGJAM members who's quoted in the report says really eloquently that, there are issues with guards recording strip searches accurately and guards recording strip searches at all. But even given those issues, it's pretty notable that the data, which probably represents the best case scenario and likely omits many strip searches, still confirms that that strip searching is excessive and ineffective.
Indeed. This is the Doing Time show. It's approximately 4:23 and you're listening to an extended interview and conversation with Sohini and Monique from the Human Rights Law Centre about strip searching in Australia and it having to cease. It's a report. So we're nearing the end of the interview Are there any concluding comments that either of you wanted to make?
I would just reiterate the actions that people can take if you are feeling a bit, flat, listening, reading the report and listening to us talk about the pretty dire state of affairs and, the human rights abuses that the government allows to thrive in the darkness behind prison walls. There is things that we can and should do together, and supporting the work of lived experience collectives like FIGJAM is a really great starting point. Did you want to add anything to that, Sohini?
No, I couldn't have said it better.
It's been so lovely to have the two of you on the show. I've always respected your work a great deal.
Thank you so much. We really respect your work in this program. It's excellent.
Oh, thank you. And actually at this point, that time, I don't even want to talk about it, but that time of year is coming up again, the radiothon. We have to raise $1,000 for the Doing Time show. Why do you think that that people need to donate to the Doing Time show at 3CR?
Oh, I think that people get really good bang for their buck when they donate to community radio and 3CR generally.
Absolutely.
But I think that the work that you do in particular, focusing on the experiences of women in prison and shining a light on that, is something that nobody else is doing in the way that you do it. And so that is why people should absolutely be donating and supporting your work.
Thank you very much. And we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. Prisoners don't have bank accounts, but but it's that's great. Look, I'm so glad, and I wanted to also at this point take the opportunity to thank Auntie Vicky Roach, who's gravely ill at the moment, but she's still doing very well, and also all the people in FIGJAM that contributed, Nikki, Stacey, who I've had on before, and Nina, Kelly, Georgia, and anybody else that I've missed. Thank you so much for doing the report and contributing the lived experience. Okay.
Yes, we thank them as well. Thank you so much, Marisa.
No, thank you so much, and enjoy your week. Keep up the good work, Sohini and Monique. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much,
Marisa.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was Sohini and Monique from the Human Rights Law Centre speaking about a very important report that was compiled by the Human Rights Law Centre, FIGJAM and Flat Out, about ending strip searches in Australian prisons, in Australian women's prisons in particular.
Rally to save public housing. Over 10,000 residents are set to be displaced, with 6,660 homes to be demolished across 44 public housing towers. All this in an ever-worsening housing crisis. Join us at the State Library of Victoria on Saturday the 30th of May at 11 a.m, and then march to the Atherton Gardens public towers in Fitzroy as we fight to save the towers, people's homes and the communities in and around them. After the rally will be a community festival at the towers. The Victorian Labor government is determined to demolish and privatise public housing and sell off public land to developers. See you on Saturday 30th of May. Together we can stop this madness. Save Public Housing Collective is a 3CR supporter.
And I don't believe in fighting today in any one front, but on all fronts. In fact, I'm a black nationalist freedom fighter.
This country is a nation of thieves.
Now, we're never going to get justice here in these filthy racist courts here.
Our people have been massacred, and we're not supposed to grieve for that. We've got to do something more drastic if we're serious about this.
Move over or we gonna move on over you.
Yilliman with Kieran Stewart-Asherton on 3CR. Dives deep into Indigenous resistance and global anti-colonial struggles. Featuring frontline activists, it confronts Australia's identity, challenges power structures and fuels revolutionary discourse. Wednesdays, 12 to 1 p.m.
And you're listening to the Doing Time Show, 3CR Community Radio. And before we actually get on to our second interview, I wanted to just give a little bit of a postscript to that interview with Sohini and Monique, and also mention that Kelly, who was one of the women that came on a couple of weeks ago from FIGJAM, Kelly Flanagan, spoke a lot about racism and First Nations trauma that happened as a result of strip searching, and that was a special broadcast that happened a couple of weeks ago. And you can certainly check out the Doing Time podcast and have a look at that interview in more detail. But really the aim of that interview was to discuss in more detail key findings and recommendations of the report from the Human Rights Law Centre. And now, coming up, I have someone very special that I speak to, and I'm very privileged very soon to introduce Tabitha Lean, who is a First Nations prison activist and advocate, and I really admire her work. But before we actually get onto that interview, I wanted to give a little bit of an introduction. So Crim Con 2026 is a gathering built by and for criminalised and formerly incarcerated people, grounded in the belief that the people most impacted by prisons, policing and punishment are not just participants in these conversations, but leaders, theorists, artists and organisers in their own right. Held across 2 days in South Australia, the event brings together people from across the country to challenge the way incarceration is spoken about in Australia, so-called Australia, and to create space for lived expertise that is too often ignored, sanitised or tokenised. The opening night centres poetry, music and art as political practice, recognising that storytelling, creativity and cultural expression are inseparable from survival, resistance and collective healing. And I'm going to ask Tabitha to come on pretty soon. I'm delighted to welcome her to the show, and she can speak about this in more detail. Hello, Tabitha, welcome.
Hi, Marisa. Thank you for having me on.
So lovely to have you. Good to hear your voice again.
You too.
Now, Tabitha, I'm wondering if you could just let listeners know what land you're from, first of all.
Sure. I'm zooming in today from the lands of the Kaurna people. So I want to acknowledge I'm a visitor to this space, an uninvited guest, and I want to acknowledge the elders of this country, but also acknowledge that right now the Kaurna people are in a deep struggle to save a piece of land, Pildawadley. And I just want to acknowledge that the ongoing stewardship of country and fighting for its survival on the Kaurna people.
Absolutely. And where are you from originally?
I was born and raised on Kaurna country, but my mother's country is in the southwestern areas, so they call Victoria. But I wasn't raised by my mother, but I was raised here in Kaurna country.
Beautiful. That's great, Tabitha. So this is really fantastic. So tell us about this event and maybe the background that's leading up to it.
Sure. We're so excited to be talking to you. We've called it Crim Con 2026. And the theme of the sort of mini convention, mini conference is why prison reform doesn't work. This whole conference is led by people who've been to prison. Everyone that you hear talking at the conference will have been to prison. We just decided to put this event on because we're really sick of people who haven't been to prison talking about us and for us. And so the idea is that CrimCon exists because the people who've lived through prisons, criminalisation and state violence are always spoken about, researched, managed and analysed by everyone except ourselves. And this is an opportunity for us to share our knowledge and our expertise and all the work we're doing with the broader public.
So CrimCon is an intervention into who gets to speak with authority about prisons and social harm.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is basically CrimCon is created to kind of disrupt the dynamic that's happening right now of people speaking for us. It's a space where criminalised and formerly incarcerated people are not just treated as token lived experience voices, but as the organisers and as the thinkers with the political analysis and expertise, and more importantly, the solutions to the current incarceration crisis that we've got in this country.
So that includes, this event includes Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal?
Absolutely. So anyone who's been in prison, we have a core organising group, and everyone in that organising group has done time here on Gunner Country. And then everyone that's been invited to speak or has put forward a suggestion for a workshop or a panel, all of the people involved in that have to have served a prison sentence. So we really want to centre the knowledge of people who've been in the cage. And it's, you know, we're trying to make the conference a little bit more human and relational, because so many of these kind of conferences about justice systems are really professionalised spaces, and they kind of strip away the realities of what imprisonment actually does to people and communities. So we wanted to bring together art, music, storytelling, as well as political education with our community, because survival under these systems has always involved creativity, connection and collective care. So on one hand, it is about reclaiming the narrative and building solidarity across communities, but it's also creating a space where people can speak really honestly about incarceration, about prison abolition, about harm, resistance and survival, without having to kind of dilute themselves to fit into these kind of institutional expectations.
Indeed, and I think I love the way this is written, actually. So criminalisation are recognised not as case studies, but as people shaping the future of justice, resistance and collective liberation.
Absolutely. Crim Con is really about shifting power. So we're tired of systems consulting us while continuing to criminalise us. We're kind of tired of lived experience being commodified while criminalised people remain excluded from kind of the leadership, employment, safety and decision making. So we want to build something different, like a space that's led by the people who know these systems from the inside, and also people who are imagining and creating futures beyond prisons.
And when is the event?
The event is June 26th and June 27th. So the Friday evening starts off with an art exhibition, music, spoken word poetry. So we sort of start by centering people at the very beginning. And then it goes on to the Saturday, where we're going to have a range of panels and workshops led by people who've been to prison, where we'll be talking about a whole range of things, including administrative violence, the way the prison kind of harms us through their administrative procedures. We're going to have a panel around abolition. And we've got a few other panels planned, as well as some workshops. But the program will be up on our website in about a week. But you can also already register to attend the event, and it's completely free. So people are encouraged to come along and hear what we've got to say.
Yeah, like it's not like the NGO ones. We have to pay about $400.
Look, we've got one coming to town, and it's like about $900 to register or something ridiculous.
Oh my God.
But what we wanted to do is create a space where community members, particularly those who've been to prison, even though the event's open to everyone, but we really wanted to make sure that people who'd been to prison actually could afford to come, which meant that we've made it free. We are currently, it's an unfunded project just put on by formerly incarcerated people. So we have suggested to people who are waged that they might want to donate, but certainly not a prerequisite for attending, because we really wanted to remove that barrier and make this a workshop by the people for the people.
So Tabitha, you're an abolition activist determined to disrupt the colonial project and abolish the prison industrial complex. And it's that anger that you have, you're challenging the colonial carceral state. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I've always been involved in prison work even prior to going to prison. And back then I kind of had this ridiculous idea that you could just make prisons better. Like if we just reformed it, things would get better. Then I went to prison and I sat in like a misery bubble for about 10 months. But after the 10 months, I started getting really angry about what I was seeing around me, my brothers and sisters and kin, caged, contained and treated really badly, and realised that this isn't a prison, this isn't a system setting out to do one thing and woefully failing. This is a system doing exactly what it means to do, which is to harm people, disappear people, kill people. So then I came to this idea. I probably never had the language before, but I came to abolition. And so for me, the basis for abolition begins from this very simple understanding that prisons, policing and punishment do not solve the conditions they claim to address. They actually manage harm through violence and through isolation and control, while leaving all the underlying causes of suffering untouched. And, you know, we see this every day, Marisa. We see poverty, racism, colonialism, child removal, homelessness, gendered violence, disability, mental distress and addiction, all entangled with criminalisation.
You had the language all right. We yarned during the pandemic, during lockdown.
Yeah.
You know, doing that show from home kept me sane, and you kept me sane, actually.
Marisa, bless.
Yeah, we had a lot of yarns. Do you remember? And we talked a lot about this stuff.
That's why I was excited to come back on the show and catch up with you and all the great work you're doing.
No, it's lovely to have you. I'm excited about it. So you spent almost 2 years in Adelaide Women's Prison, 18 months on home detention, and 3 years on parole. And so you are well equipped to use your lived prison experience to argue that the criminal punishment system is a brutal and too often deadly colonial frontier. And you're saying then that the system needs to be abolished, otherwise your people won't be safe, which is true.
Yeah, that's right. We know that prisons don't rehabilitate because for those of us organising Crim Con, we've lived that isolation, the violence, the dehumanisation and the intergenerational damage that prisons produce. And we've watched them disappear people into systems that make them poorer, sicker and more disconnected from the community. So for me, abolition is just about refusing the lie that cages equal care. We don't need to respond to social problems with surveillance and policing in prisons. There is another way.
Indeed. So are you able to just, in case listeners have just tuned in, are you able to just repeat the details of the event and where it is and just briefly what it is?
Absolutely. So Crim Con is running over 2 days in Adelaide on Kaurna country. So the 26th of June will be an art, music, poetry evening. And then on the Saturday, the 27th of June from 11 a.m. will be a range of panels and workshops led by people who've been to prison. It's a completely free event and registrations to attend are open now.
Fantastic. So is there anything else that you want to say in conclusion?
Look, I'd encourage people to register. You can head to radfaction, radfaction.com.au and click on the events page and it'll give you information about Crim Con and exactly where you can register.
I think I interviewed, was it Daniel?
Yes, you interviewed Daniel from Rad Faction, yes.
Will he be involved?
Yes, Rad Faction is driving the event alongside a range of other criminalised and formerly incarcerated people in our community here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming onto the program, Tabitha.
Thanks for having me, Marisa.
And enjoy the program, and I'm sure I'll be having you back again.
Absolutely. Look forward to speaking to you again.
Beautiful.
All right, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was Tabitha Lean speaking about her lived experience in prison. And the Do and Time show is a place of safety where people from marginalised communities can bring their lived experience onto the show. And Tabitha spoke about Crim Con 2026, which is the gathering built by and for criminalised and formerly incarcerated people, grounded in the belief that the people most impacted by prisons, policing and punishment are not just participants in these conversations, but leaders, theorists, artists and organisers in their own right. Held across 2 days in South Australia, the event brings together people from across the country to challenge the way incarceration is spoken about in Australia and to create space for lived experience expertise that is too often ignored, sanitised or tokenised. The opening night centres poetry, music and art as political practice, recognising that storytelling, creativity and cultural expression are inseparable from survival, resistance and collective healing. The second day of Crim Con focuses on workshops, panels and discussions that move beyond reformist narratives and towards deeper conversations about abolition, community accountability, survival after criminalisation and the ongoing impacts of prisons on families and communities. More than conference, Crim Con is an intervention into who gets to speak with authority about prisons and social harm. It rejects the idea that criminalised people should only be invited to share trauma, while professionals retain power over analysis and decision-making. Instead, Crim Con creates a space where lived experience is treated as intellectual, political and strategic expertise, where people who have survived criminalisation are recognised not as case studies, but as people shaping the future of justice, resistance and collective liberation. So I just wanted to summarise that. We are nearing the end of the show and I wanted to summarise that, and if people can rock up to that event, do register on the website. And I'm hoping now that I can go to a song, and this song is called Women's Business, and it's by Ruby Hunter, and she's passed away now, so I pay tribute to her and honour her. She's a First Nations musician.
Woman business in the home, with my fingers to the bone. Woman business in the home, woman business, live alone on the streets or in a home. She's a woman, not alone, with the children or a man. She's a woman, she understands. Woman business in the home, with my fingers to the bone. Woman business in the home, woman business, live alone. No, 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 woman business, live alone in an office or in a car. The problems they are very far. Do it elsewhere, fashionable thing. She's a woman, she knows her thing. Woman business in the home, with my finger to the bone. Woman business in the home, woman business, live alone. Woman business, live alone. Woman business, live alone.
3CR celebrating 50 years.
Throughout the month of June, we're asking you to support fierce, independent and community-controlled media by making a donation to our radiothon.
We'll be taking donations online, over the phone and in the station to help keep 3CR going for another year.
The 3CR Radiothon kicks off in June. To donate, go to 3cr.org.au, call the station on 0394198377
or drop in at 21 Smith Street, Fitzroy during business hours.
3CR, celebrating 50 years.
I went down to the river, I sat down on the bank. I tried to think but I couldn't, so I jumped in and sank. I came up once and I hollered, I came up twice and cried. If that water hadn't have been so cold, I might have sunk and died. But it was cold in that water, it was cold. It was cold in that water, so cold. I took the elevator 16 floors above the ground. I thought about my baby and thought I would jump down. I stood there and I hollered, I stood there and I cried. If it hadn't have been so high, I might have jumped and died. But it was high up there, it was high, so high up there. So since I'm still here living, I guess I will live on. I could have died for love, but for living I was born. Though you may hear me holler, though you may see me cry, I'll be dogged, sweet baby, if you're gonna see me die. Life is fine, fine as wine, life is fine.
And you just heard a song by Paul Kelly, Life is Fine. Personally, I really love his acoustic work, and he has done a lot of collaboration work with Archie Roach and other Joey Geyer, Uncle Joey Geyer, and other First Nations musicians. It's approximately 4:51 and we're nearing the end of our show. I wanted to thank all our guests for coming on, in particular thanking Sohini and Monique, and also Tabitha Lean, and we've promoted the event Crim Con 2026. I love it. Before we end the show, just wanted to speak briefly about Radiothon, which is coming, and this year we're celebrating 50 years. We're aiming, well, that's the theme. It's the theme, and we're celebrating 50 years. Goes hand in hand. We're aiming to raise $300,000 to keep the station strong. And with your help, we know we can. No donation is too small or big, and all donations over $2 are tax deductible. Radiothon starts in June, but it's always good to start early, and just to remind listeners to help us keep 3CR on air for another year. And in 2026, 3CR is celebrating 50 years, and we look forward to your donation. The Doin' Time show actually has a target of $1,000 this year, and Radiothon actually starts in June. And if you want to make an early donation, you can pick up the phone now and ring 9419-8377, or you can drop into the station and drop off your donation, or you can donate online and help keep 3CR on air for another year. And donate to all shows at 3CR. We actually have a wide range of shows. And no, this is not a Radiothon show, but I just think it's really important to start early and remind listeners that we're still here and we're not going away. And this is Radical Radio, and celebrating 50 years. In the month of June on the Doin' Time show, you will be hearing some interviews from the archives, and there will be a lot of reflection of what 3CR has done in the past, and indeed how technology has changed 3CR, whereas before we were just operating with reels and audio tapes, records, and now it's all computers. But yeah, stay tuned because there's going to be some really interesting and informative shows coming up. And of course, staff are working really hard now, and volunteers are working really hard to do the special 50-year celebration that's happening in July. So pick up the phone. I'm actually going to go now into an announcement and come back and say goodbye really soon.
You're listening to 3CR, an apartheid-free zone. 3CR's Committee of Management has passed a declaration formalising our commitment to a free Palestine. As an apartheid-free zone, we're committed to boycotting Israel's regime of oppression. We stand firmly against apartheid in Palestine and encourage other organisations to join us in this struggle. Visit our website to read the full declaration and learn more about our commitment to justice and liberation for Palestine and the apartheid-free zone movement.
Every form of discrimination that exists in our community is magnified and utilised by prisons to cause greater division and disarm solidarity.
We've got to really put a lens of perspective on this and know that there are children being incarcerated as young as 10 years old.
Police and prisons, they're doing exactly what this colony wants them to.
Who do we defend? And who else? Prisons! Pull them down! Yeet.
3CR, stay tuned, stay radical.
And you're listening to the Doing Time show. It's approximately 4:56. It's Marisa and I'm out of here. And we're going to be going out now with our theme song, Black Fella, White Fella by the Rumpy Band. Stay safe, everybody, and be kind to each other. And I'll see you next week. Stay tuned for the Doing Time show every Monday from 4 to 5 for the Doing Time show. Take care of each other. Bye.
As long as you are true fella, as long as you are real fella. All the people of different races with different lives in different places. It doesn't matter what your name is. We got to have lots of changes. We need more brothers if we're to make it. We need more sisters if we're to save it. Are you the one who's gonna stand up and be counted? Are you the one who's gonna be there when we're shouting? Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand? Are you the one who understands this family plan? Black fella, white fella, yellow fella, any fella, it doesn't matter what you color, as long as you are true fella. All the people of different races, with different lives, in different places, it doesn't matter which religions, it's all the same where the ship is sinking. We need more brothers if we're to make it. We need more sisters if we're to save it. Are you the one who's gonna stand up and be counted? Are you the one Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand? Are you the one who understands this family plan? Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand?
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.